Sorry for the 5 minutes delay. I'm very pleased to be here today with you. My name is Daniela Vincenti, and I am the spokesperson of the president of the European Economic and Social Committee, which is in this house. Up to 7 months ago, I was in the private sector. So for me, you have here someone that was in the private sector and that went to the public sector. And today we're going precisely to talk about maybe the difference between the private and the public sector when it comes to visual communication and how to unleash the creativity for public institutions. Now, the assumption here is that the public sector does not know how to communicate with visuals. I have a different perception after having just arrived. And I would like maybe just ask you, what is your perception? Do you really think that the public sector does not know how to use visuals? Please raise your hand if you think the public sector does not know how to use visuals. Okay. Clear. Well, I hope this session will prove it wrong. I think the problem is, it's not that there is no creativity in the institution, in the public sector, it's just that we don't dare. And we are very much tied in a very politically correct environment. And short, my personal story. As I said, I arrived here 7 months ago, and when we came up in a cabinet with a motto called Renaissance Dare Sustainable Europe, I asked for visuals. I got very conservative, conventional, institutional visual. Since I don't sleep at night very often, I went on Shutterstock and I started browsing. And I came up with a lot of pictures. And the following day, I went to my designers in-house and I said, and now you take these, you put them together, try to find something, but forget what you have done so far, use your creativity, and just do it. Well, maybe now you can show the picture that came up. One of this course, his idea is that we don't use enough what binds us together, which is a European identity, therefore culture, a common culture identity. So we came up with this visual, which obviously is not very institutional, very red and bold, but we did it. And I think I'm very pleased today to have 4 panelists that will prove wrong the perception that we cannot do it. I think we have great examples in the United States with the Obama campaign, but lately with the Alexander Stubb campaign. I think he was very bold in his political communication. He did not win, as you know, to be the Spitzenkandidat for the EPP, but it was a bold campaign. So, without further ado, I'm pleased to give the floor to 4 very expert in this field. Anca Scortariu, am I pronouncing it right? Is head of sector of visual communication at the DG Communication at the European Commission. And she's going to focus on the link between the creative process and graphic design and the expectation of the EU institutions. Then we're going to have Arlene Baghdad. She is Director General of the External Communication at the Federal Public Service Chancellery of the Prime Minister of Belgium. She will focus mainly on the communication efforts of the Belgian government in view especially of the campaign 99 Reasons Why Belgium is Uniquely Phenomenal. And I hope you can teach us a few things. Susanne Weber, who is head of digital communication at the Austrian presidency of the Council of the European Union, and she will focus on the importance of more visual communication in the social media arena. And then last but not least is Yuri Albrecht, who is the curator of the Forum on European Culture and director of the Bali in the Netherlands. Maybe you'd pronounce it better. Molto bene. Focusing on the result of the Eurolab at the Forum on European Culture on New Ideas to Communicate the EU. So without further ado, I'll give maybe Anka the floor, and I hope you know how to use this.
Of visuals inside PowerPoint presentation, I'm going to start with this video. So if my colleague would help with running the video. Yes, please. It's a feeling. And if we could show the presentation, that would be great. And who said Europe is a thought that needs to become a feeling. And I believe that we, visual communicators in the European institutions, are well placed to carry on this message and transform it from a slogan into reality through our work, through the visuals we make that need to carry emotions, that need to speak to hearts and minds. So what do we need in the European institutions in order to be able to deliver this kind of powerful visuals? First of all, we need to invest in professional visual communication. We need to build in-house knowledge in the field, and we need to make sure that graphic design is done by professional graphic designers and to trust these designers that they know what they're doing. Secondly, I think we need to get out of the EU bubble. We need to send our designers to conferences, we need to subscribe to journals and magazines, and we need to bring knowledge from outside of the bubble inside and facilitate an exchange of ideas. We also need to get to know our audience better. In the EU institutions, we know that we talk to an audience that comes from many different cultural backgrounds, that speaks different languages. What we design and works in Slovakia might not work in Portugal and the other way around. So we need to get out there, and we need to stop designing for our hierarchy's approval, but to design for our public. Finally, I think we need to work together, or work to get her, depending what your priorities are. But what I mean by this is that communication shouldn't be handled in a production line type of process, where we have one group of people who write the copy, and then another group of people who do the design, and finally a third group of people who has to put it online or on social media or web. We need to bring these people together to allow visuals and text to influence each other and to create a unitary product that works better for our target audiences. And I'll show you some examples here where we've kind of turned the process on its head and we created the visuals first and then the copy came in later. The You and Me campaign is a nice example where people with different competencies and different backgrounds worked together to create a campaign that worked for its target audience. In this case, it was young people, people between 17 and 35 years old. And we had graphic designers and photographers and copywriters and data analysts sitting together and coming up with this campaign. And you can already see in the visuals that they connect with this audience. They're colorful and they're fresh and they're messy. And you don't see any people in the photos themselves, but you can feel the presence. This campaign was massively successful, and it even won Golden Dolphin at Cannes for being one of the best integrated communication campaigns of 2018. Another project that we're working on at the moment, and it's in its early phases, is the redesign of the visitor center, the Schumann Roundabout. And here we've brought in an illustrator from Lille to work with us and create content that is personalized for the messages we want to send out. We went for a bright and cheerful and colorful approach. And I feel that with examples such as this, we're not 2 steps behind what is happening in the private sector. I really feel like we're riding the wave, and I'm quite pleased with where we're going with this. This is another campaign that we did for social media, and we've created dozens of this square format visuals for Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and they talk about EU values and benefits that the EU brings to its citizens. And the idea is that each of them is a standalone product, and you can see that the design varies depending on the topic. It really matches it. For example, when we talk about food safety standards, we baked these biscuits. The designer who worked on this baked the biscuits. We bought colorful paper from Schlepper, and we took these photos in our offices, and even the flag in this photo is a biscuit. For the image on the right, we were asked to create a visual for data privacy online. So we created the visual first, and then the copy matched what we were showing in the visual. We are very attached to our personal data. Sometimes we went for minimal design. Sometimes we use cultural references and humor, like for toy safety. In Europe, even Chucky is safe. Sometimes we have topics that at first sight are not that easy to work with, but we have to communicate on this. So how do we tackle the EU budget, which may seem at first sight as a very technical and complex topic? When we started working on this, we realized that the EU budget is not about the money, it's about what we do with it. So with that line of thinking, we took details and patterns from the Euro bills, and we use these as backgrounds for the visuals and as textures on illustrations. And we brought out colorful icons that represent the topics we're talking about: innovation or climate change or migration or defense. And we took this one step further, and we redesigned, we created a customized design for the portraits of the members of the college to be used with visual quotes on social media. And you can see this etching style that's visible on the bills. Sometimes we take our design off the screen, and sometimes it hurts, like it did for this Christmas card we prepared for the commission a couple of years ago, where one of my colleagues designed a bunch of geometric forms for trees and arranged them in a winter landscape, which we then shot in a professional studio. And we also made a stop-motion animation, which we used on social media. Another example is us baking flag biscuits. And these were used again around Christmas on Instagram. And this was done with food coloring, so they were edible. Some projects hurt, some projects were delicious. Now, this was the part where I was going to show you the video, which you've already seen. So I will cut my presentation short, and thank you for your attention.
You could have brought some of those biscuits with you, huh, for us, but anyway, I definitely I think this is was an interesting way of making visual comestibles. But now I'm turning to Arlene Baghdad. Maybe she, now that we have La Guerre des Frites, as we heard last night, maybe, yeah, could you give me the, thank you. Maybe we could continue on the comestible side.
Voilà, bonjour à tous. Je vais parler en français. Voilà, je viens.
Hello. I would like to present an example of a campaign, a branding campaign about Belgium. So the presentation will be shown in a moment. This campaign was carried out by the government following the attacks in March 2016.
Les objectifs.
The goals of the campaign were to improve the image of Belgium, to attract tourists in Belgium and investors, while knowing that Belgium is a complicated country and tourism is not in the remit of the federal government. So if you do not want me to make this presentation, you could just say so. For this campaign, we targeted Belgian citizens. So if you turn on your microphone, you cut off the microphone of the speaker. The target were citizens, tourists, investors, and some specific countries, neighboring countries of Belgium, Canada, the USA, Japan. So,
excusez-moi, est-ce que quelqu'un...
Excuse me.
With the finger. Otherwise you cut the lady. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ok, j'essaie de continuer. Voilà.
I'll try and carry on. This campaign was based on very visual elements, and we were targeting tourists and investors, and we cooperated with an organization called the Social Lab. It's a public and private organization. And we talk about Belgian DNA, the Belgians, people who are quite simple. We are a free country. We campaigned on the theme of Belgium being a country that's nice to live in. And our motto was that Belgium was uniquely phenomenal, and we set a humorous tone to the campaign. So I won't show you all the visuals. We built a brand for Belgium with different tools, social media, PR and influencing. We organized events, quite a few of them, and we also used the digital sphere. Here you have a few examples. We have the logo, a motto, and a visual. We had a lot of content, so the campaign was very diverse. Here you have a few more examples. Chocolate is best kept away from out of the sun, so it's no surprise to find so much in Belgium. Or we had the the Trappist monks never talking about how good their beer is because they have committed never to speak. Here you have examples of videos we used on social media and about different subjects. We also organized pop-up events to use these visuals on the Dynasty building, very close to the central train station. We used the middle picture that's on the bottom of the slide, and we talked about rolling out a red carpet, and we talked about the carpet of flowers that we create every year on the Grand Place. And we also distributed some flowers on that day. And there's also a famous singer on stage who sang a few songs by Jacques Brel in a neighborhood that's close to the main train station. We organized different types of events to reach different kinds of audiences. We were in the farm fair in Libramont, or in the Brussels Summer Festival, or we were present in a big car racing event. And there was also some official visits abroad in India with the royal family. Here you have a few more examples of events we organized, and the third image on the bottom of the slide talks about virtual reality. Visitors could see a film if they came by our stand, and this was organized in 20 cities in Belgium, and the film was made by a Belgian director. He made a film in Brussels airport, and he filmed how happy people were when they arrived in Brussels. So the place, the location of the shooting was not chosen by chance. Our budget was not very big and was not sufficient to reach all the audiences and all the countries we wanted to reach, so we had to use social media. We had partnerships, and these still stand, with embassies and Belgian consulates. The microphone of the speaker is off. So I still have a few more minutes, I believe. So I mentioned the posters and signs we had. The speaker's microphone. So here you have examples of the campaign in Liège, Mons, and in other cities. Here we worked with foreign influencers. We also used visuals in airports, on the buses that go to the airport, and the Belfius building, which you may know, which is in the center of Brussels. At night, displays the motto, uniquely phenomenal. Here you have a list of our partners, and we also worked on some emojis, and we also worked with personalities such as singers, Stromae, or other artists. The press coverage for a campaign like this is obviously very important, and we managed to get coverage thanks to influencers. Here you see the value of purchases in the media, close to 2 million euros. The partnerships are free. We do not pay the partners. We only cover some of their production costs, if they have any. And there's an example I'd like to mention. During the Fashion Week in Paris, we used a mannequin piece, and mannequin piece bought a few designer pieces, and this cost us 10,000 euros, but the return in press coverage was worth 100,000 euros.
Donc, des comptes qui ont été créés.
So a number of accounts were created and they worked well, particularly on Facebook. We have a number of accounts. And we can see that we have solid audiences in Italy and Spain, although they are not target countries for this campaign. A number of videos on different topics: cycling, chocolate, jazz, fashion, diversity. These are really important tools for us to engage with the target audience. So we really tried to build a community there. It's been overall positive. It's really led to a conversation. There is some moderation, but we really don't have to do much work by way of deleting things, and we really do try to appeal to common sense. So you can see here for the last two videos, they're linked to sort of folklore themes. They've had a great number of views. We don't know why, but that's what happened. A state visit to Canada, that was another occasion where we created a number of videos together with the consul, but also Alice on the Roof, a singer. So we tried to reach out to different audiences. I won't be able to go into detail for everything, but I wanted to show a few other visuals and the number of views that we've had. So we really tried to keep up with daily life of people, and we tried to use Facebook and the big events that really bring people together. I mentioned influencers. We've organised press trips with Chinese journalists, and that's another world. Here I can show you one of the influencers has 4 million followers. For us as Europeans, that's quite difficult to achieve. So as soon as she posts, this will be seen by hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions. So it's interesting to partner with these influencers for that reason. We also took advantage of events which helped us to propel our campaign. We see here an artist on the balcony of the Grand Place. His glasses are in the colour of our campaign. We did a Facebook campaign where people could post their photos wearing the colours of the Belgian football team, the Red Devils. And they were then sent the same glasses. Campaign outcomes then. I'll end with this.
So welcome, I'm very pleased to be here and to speak about the presidency, the Austrian president. Okay. Okay, it's working again. Perfect. It's full of surprises. First the screen, now, well, but now it's working. So I'm very happy to be here and to speak about the challenges and the Austrian presidency of the Council of the European Union faces. I just tried to summarize in very we face. The first thing is it's limited in time, so it's just like 6 months. We just have a very limited time frame to communicate. Then the second point is it's difficult to identify phases of the presidency. You can't make use of other strategies you use in like personalized communication. That makes it quite difficult to communicate because you have the several ministers attending the council formations, but that's basically the whole government, the whole Austrian government, but you don't have like one or two faces that you could really associate or relate to different topics. Then the next point would be the institutional architecture of the European Union is very complex to plan, it's clear, and so is the Council presidency. It's very difficult to get it over, to communicate what it is all about. Yeah, you don't have too much time to prepare content, of course, given the limited time of 6 months. It's just like July until December. And you're kind of always rushing from one event to the other. There is always surprises coming up. Yeah, and like the presidency in general organizes like 300 events in 6 months. So that's a lot of events and a lot of topics to communicate. And you also can't really prioritize several topics because all of them are equally important. And yeah, that's kind of relates to what you said at the beginning. I also worked in the private sector, and compared to the public sector, public institution, one of the main differences, in my opinion, is sometimes lack of resources, and sometimes also lack of understanding for what's really important. That we really use like or make use of professionals in this field, like or just getting enough resources in terms of budget, human resources, technology, and skills. Doesn't work.
Doesn't work?
No.
Doesn't work?
It does not work. Okay.
Froze.
Yeah, but the presidency also provides you with opportunities. So you really attract high media interest, local and international media. It's not a never-ending story, so you have opportunities to really concentrate your resources at the beginning and at the end. So like communicating the results of the presidency, that offers some stuff. They have the possibility to take part in something exceptional, and they also feel like they are part of something really big and important, and I think that's really important. And topics are not only related to politics and policies, but we also have like the cultural program, we have like touristic aspects, and it offers also opportunities for behind-the-scenes communications, especially in Austria, where we don't have so much opportunities to communicate on European Union affairs. Yeah, that's our web and social media presence. We just try to really streamline all of our channels. So this is also an invitation. If you don't follow us, please follow us. We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, and we also have the web page. And you also see the main hashtag on the slide. Yeah. Now we have another lake because it's autumn, and we thought it would be nice to change into an autumn scenery. Yeah, here I just wanted to, as the time is really limited, I just put in some links, and I would just shortly explain and rush through it. So the first thing is like we use explainer infographics, like for example the parliamentary dimension. We use explainer videos, very short videos, here for example the Eastern Partnership. And then we have the EU Sunday Brunch, which is a series, a cooking series. Each week we feature another country and a special meal from another country, because we thought it would be nice to relate also to this kind of cultural aspect. Maybe we could just show it to the audience. Google Chrome browser. Thank you.
Maybe could you go ahead? Yeah, that's the problem with visual, isn't it?
Yeah,
That when it doesn't work. Could you go ahead?
not just go ahead.
Lithuanians are among the strongest basketball players in the world, and one reason for their success are cepelinai, their national dish. Why? Because cepelinai contain carbs, carbs, and more carbs.
Just go back to the presentation. Yeah, the idea behind this was that we wanted to use like humor in a way. We just didn't want to show like just the Austrian cultural traditions, but to feature each country, as the presidency is not just about Austria, but also about other countries. And it's highly successful. It was a little bit of a surprise. It came to us as a surprise, so yeah. And it wasn't easy to get approval for this at the beginning. Yeah, then we also use, of course, we use like quote visuals, as we also saw. Then we have animated video on the presidency cultural program. I will just rush through it, but I just wanted to give you the links so that you can afterwards just go on the Eurocom website and look at it. And we tried to have like info videos on each of the console configurations. Yeah, this is an example for our infographics. It's always in this kind of corporate design, according to the corporate design manual. We also create, like, for basically each of the infographics, also animated video. Yeah, at the beginning, so one of the advantages of the presidency is it has a beginning and an end, so you can use like countdowns on social media that you can really visualize. And we also used video explainers at the beginning. That's basics. So that's basically examples for infographics about Austria. We also try to, yeah, use humor in a way, not too much, but sometimes. Yeah, and there are just some tools. Of course, we have professional designers, we have graphic artists, but we also do a lot of it by ourselves. So the team has skills in Adobe Creative Cloud and Canva. So basically, we make use of these two tools. That's some example for event communications. Our major event was, of course, the Salzburg Summit of the Heads of State and Government in September. This is another video I would want you to show. So please just click on the link or copy it to Google Chrome. Okay, let's see. this is one example for this kind of event-related videos that we try to do for each of the informal ministerial meetings in Austria, but also for some other major events. And here you can also see the infographics for Salzburg. Yeah, just some lessons learned at the end of my presentation. Yeah, just involve designers and videographers right from the beginning. Try to keep it short and simple. So for social media, it's important, especially for Instagram, having videos of about 1 minute of length. That's enough. Use behind-the-scenes images of like ordinary people, but also, of course, your ministers attending events. Engage in social media series. That's hugely successful. Be authentic, stay true to your tone of voice, like a mix of professional images and behind-the-scenes images, and prioritize your channels. For example, for us, it's the most important channel is Twitter, of course, also for content and topics. But second one is Instagram, and Facebook comes only third. So this may come as a surprise, but Instagram is really, it's getting much more important. And then also social media can and sometimes should be funny. So for example, last week for All Saints Day, we put in some information on the Central Cemetery in Vienna. So about Austria, facts and figures shouldn't be just like facts and figures, but they also should be funny. This maybe all of you will know it when the council goes Hollywood, so it doesn't matter to show it again. But yeah, maybe we could discuss about it later on in the discussion. Yeah, thank you for your attention.
Working? Yeah. Okay. Yuri, we heard it quite extensively: humor, food, music, authenticity. Now you're the expert when it comes to culture and creativity. What you have heard, what you're doing, how can you give us a little bit more of ammunitions to hit it straight in the middle? Please.
Okay, thank you very much. I will try to do my best. Let's see whether I can show something on the screen. My name is Yuri Albrecht. I'm from Amsterdam. Part of the institutions. I'm not part of professional communications. I'm a trained historian and philosopher by training. I taught European thought and European history of thought in the University of Oxford, and I've been a director of the Bali for about 8 years now. The Bali is an art center for the arts, which is artist-centered, and we work with artists to bring new ideas to the world. We have 3 small halls with a cafe and a restaurant, and we have about 1,000 live events every year because we have 3 halls, and we are a sort of a breeding center for ideas. And about 3 years ago, I decided to make a forum on European culture, which is about 4 days with about 100 events, live events, and we thought that it was a good idea to have sort of the practice of the Bali comprised into a few days in which we show, don't tell that Europe is an idea, and Europe is a philosophical idea, is a cultural idea, and it's not something which has, which primarily is something which is made or owned by the institutions. It's, after all, the idea of European culture is much older than the European Union. It's much older, and it's interesting that people think that Europe is shaped by politicians and public servants and bankers and economists, and I think that it ought to be shaped at least in the main, in sort of as much as those 2 categories, by artists and thinkers, and maybe you can call journalists. It's not about the European Union, it's about Europe. And we have to remember that European culture is its unique selling point. If you ask anybody in the world, you know, what's so unique about Europe, they will say culture. That's the first. But first is culture. They say Michelangelo, or they say Beethoven, or Bach, or Mozart, or, and they say the Louvre. And so, and European culture is much older than the European nation states. I mean, Europe now is seen as a conglomerate of nation states, and those nation states, you know, take very much care that it's sort of in the interest of the nation state that the union stays, you know, within these frameworks. But of course, the culture is much older, and the whole idea of Europe precedes the idea of the nation state. The nation state is, you know, an idea of, as far as I'm concerned, fairly bad and at least a lethal idea. And the European culture is much older. It's the layer under it. So we thought a forum on European culture, which is not funded by the European Union and not funded by any of the institutions, but by private foundations, is a good idea. And of course, European culture goes from Iceland to Moscow and to Athens and to Madrid. It's not only the European Union. So we thought we did 2 now. We do them every 2 years, and I don't think I can show the next because this is shut off again. Maybe
Click on the.
Yeah, or let me click on it. We did anyway. We did 2 of those. Let's see whether we can sort it out. We were 2 of those events based on the idea that. Of course, that means you have to ask big artists to actually show them, give them the platform to show what their ideas are about and what their ideas on Europe are about. And our chair just said, you know, it maybe has to do place and the real audience. Instead of telling him what to do, you trust him, like Anke just said, you know, you have to give real graphic designers, because they know their skill, and have to involve real graphic designers. So you have to involve real artists. And we went to the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam, where we had performance art. I made a play because we put together, in the first edition, we put together a booklet, Rethinking Europe, Thoughts on Europe, Past, Present and Future, where we put together a lot of the speeches, the political speeches, which are done in the past 50, 60 years by Mitterrand or by Václav Havel or by Margaret Thatcher. And I asked Ivo van Hove, which is a theater director, to make a play out of it and put in between his Shakespeare parts, and parts by Goethe and parts by Victor Hugo, and intermingle it. And these speeches, and suddenly if you put them next to a Shakespeare speech, if you put Havel or Mitterrand next to a Shakespeare speech, people realize that these are ideas about Europe. It's not only a political speech, it's full of ideas. It's full of ideas about what our culture is. And suddenly they realize that. And people said to me, Yuri, you must be out of your mind. Do you think that people are going to listen to old 20, 30 years old political speeches and sit in the audience and sit out, you know, 1.5 hours, you're out of your mind. And they did. And actually, when at the end of this is a picture of it, where we had 10 actors. We had Jude Law, we had Lars Eidinger, we had 8 actors from the most famous Dutch theater group. And at the end, when we had Alle Menschen werden Brüder recited by those 10, and we suddenly put the music over it, there were an amazing amount of people in tears in the audience. Would you believe that people could be in tears on political speeches by Margaret Thatcher and Václav Havel? Yes, well, I mean, it is possible. But that's about unleashing creativity. And it's about thinking that you have to trust Ivo van Hove with making a theater play. And when we actually asked Jude Law to come, and we thought we can never pay, he said, it's so important, I come for nothing, you know, pay my flight. So that's the other important thing we learned. Here you see Jude Law at the rehearsal. And here you see Arnhem Grunberg at the Modern Art Museum in Amsterdam. Arnhem Grunberg is the most important Dutch novelist, doing a performance about meeting other Europeans. And here we have we did several round tables of interview marathons on what is Europe, asking artists and asking people from the Commission and asking Rem Koolhaas and me did 12 hours of interviews continuously. Here's the director of the Stedelijk Museum, Beatrix Roef. We did all sorts of different interventions to show, don't tell. And actually you see there Steven Peterman, who you've seen maybe this morning explaining about Eurolab. This is a theater play. This is another theater. We did a theater play with Gyuri Konrad about Gewaltherrschaft, about totalitarianism in Europe, which was amazing, amazing sort of performance. We did it, and at the end we went with hundreds of people in a train through Europe to do theater all over Europe. We did all sorts of performances. We did in 2018, we did another one. The second one, instead of rethinking Europe, we said act for democracy, because by now I think it's about time to act for democracy and speak up as artists and thinkers. And one of the things we did was the Eurolab, which Stefan Peterman talked about this morning. We asked Rem Koolhaas and Wolfgang Tillmans to come together and sit in the Stedelijk Museum for 4 days and develop new images for Europe, and give them carte blanche and have people from all over Europe come in and do their and contribute their creativity with it. Here you see a picture of the working sessions, which went on for 4 days continuously. I mean, the atmosphere in that room was so amazing. And the amount of press which tried to get in, because we didn't let them in, on an event on European communication where people with cameras tried to sneak in to have pictures of it. We did also a theater play this time, not on the speeches on Europe, we did one on the politics of identity and how nationalism is ripping Europe apart. And we asked our Minister of Culture to come, and she played a part in it. And it was packed. It was packed, and she read out our Declaration of Independence, which is the Plakkaat van Verlatingen in Dutch, and she read it out, and that in a performance on nationalism was just amazing. The atmosphere in it, and that's Hans Kesting, one of our main actors in Holland. Here you see part of the play, because here they read out part of Mein Kampf of Adolf Hitler, also a famous book on the politics of identity, and which was very gripping, actually. We did several spoken beat night. We did all sorts of performances, and also we did in the main theater. We brought out those 2 books, which are sort of an anthology of texts about Europe and about European ideas. And the amazing thing is that the enthusiasm of artists from all over Europe, whether it's Gyuri Konrad, whether it's Rudiger Safransky, whether it's Lars Eidinger, they come, they cooperate, they don't want to be paid. Actually, they put money in. If Wolfgang Tillmans put from his own private foundation an amazing amount of money in, and 4 days of his time. Professors, thinkers. This is the Eurolab. You saw something about this morning. We try to develop all sort of new visuals for Europe, or for the European idea. This is Wolfgang Tillmans' posters again in all sort of ways. I think this is very nice. Your grandparents fought for it. Your grandparents fought for it. Your grandparents fought for it. Your children depend on it. You just need to vote for it. Which is, I mean, if that's already too much. Voter turnout in European elections. Recharge the EU. This is the same. This is the same image, but looked from the other side. And we, in a few days, put together all sorts of different images. But I think the important thing is that if you leave Europe to the economists and politicians, to the public servants and the bankers, yeah, it might be a bit of a bleak future. We need to reuse creativity, because that's the unique selling point of Europe.
Thank you so much, Yuri. That's why I wanted to end up with you, because I was very moved by one thing that President Juncker said. As you know, we attribute to Monet the saying that if we had to start all over again, we would start from culture rather than a market. But and Juncker said, of course, he didn't say it, but he should have said it. And I heard a lot from all of you what we could do, but really, and what you are doing in your, different institutions. But what I didn't really hear is a few elements to unleash, because unleash means we're going to get out from here and start tomorrow doing exactly and tell. Now, as you know, our institutions are very stuck, if I can call it like that. Maybe I will be fired tomorrow, but are really stuck in a mold that is very conventional. So how do you break the mold and make sure that it's not just one example or another example, that across, because everybody can be creative, even economists can be creative, even scientists. I mean, Einstein used to play violin before actually he could come up with a solution for a scientific dilemma. So how do you make sure that everybody, because we do have a lot of problems with migration, with the Eurozone, etc. So you need to unleash this creativity across the board. And the creative people, the communicators, need to do that. So my question to you, maybe it's a long question, but how do you, if you had to choose one thing, which one would that be? And you have to be quick, because then I want to ask the floor to react as well. So who starts?
I think it's very easy. I think it's very easy. If you have to choose one thing, I mean, you can do many things, of course, but if you have to choose one thing, involve real artists and really involve them and pay them. So have a budget for it. So it's not their hobby, it's their work. And if you ask good designers and good artists to really make something. And I think and trust them with that, because the art community is for 98% European, proud Europeans. But pay them and trust them with it, and have a budget in it, instead of asking them to do it for nothing, and instead of thinking that you can get away with doing it yourself and doing so a little bit of, but pay good designers.
Yeah, I would just like to say, try to get a good mix of people. Of course, professional artists or designers, as we are talking about visual creativity. But I think that creativity is cross borders, and it's also cross, like education. It's designers, of course, but you also need good content designers. You need like writers, you need editors, you need people who speak different languages, but perhaps also, I don't know, like people who studied something completely different. So I think that's important, to get like a mix of people who just like this idea of brainstorming for 4 days, and take your time to come up with ideas. So that would be my input.
Anka.
Well, I'm happy to hear my fellow panelists, because that's exactly what I've put in my presentation. If we have to focus on three things, those are the work with professionals and trust them that they know their job, and invest in visual communication. And then try to think outside of the EU bubble, bring professionals and artists and creatives from outside. Think about the local dimension. It's difficult to have a one-size-fits-all in Europe, so think about the people you're communicating with, and work collaboratively with different people with different skills, especially with writers. This is something that we're still, in the Commission, we call this breaking the silos. And those of you who are from the Commission are probably fed up with hearing this, but that's what we are trying to do there. We're trying to break this paradigm where we have specialists working in their own little bubble, and then when they're finished with their part of the work, they send it on to the next step in the production line, and then other people work on it. We're trying to change that and work together to improve.
Je ne veux pas être rabat-joie, mais quand
Well, I don't want to be a killjoy, but when you work in a public institution and working in a creative agency, that's not the same environment and they're not governed by the same rules. In the public sector, we have legal obligations which are completely justified, but we need to, for instance, translate into all our official languages. As you know, here in Belgium, we officially communicate in 3 languages and sometimes also in a 4th, English. We have accessibility standards. If we publish a video online, it needs to be subtitled. It needs to be accessible to the hard of hearing. That's normal, but we have to respect it. So we can't just launch into something and go, right, let's publish. We do have to abide by certain rules, and perhaps that hampers creativity, but it does comply with other objectives which are important socially. Now, at the level of information, we have an obligation to be comprehensive, correct. We have to verify information. We can't endanger the position of our ministers by publishing something less reliable. So there are certain rules which mean that perhaps creativity cannot run completely free. However, that doesn't stop us, as has been said, from creating more collaborations and perhaps being slightly less politically correct, listen more to citizens and our public, request more feedback so that we can adapt.
Thank you. Now I'm turning to you. I am going to take a series of 2 or 3 questions. And I see 1 hand, but please raise your hand. 1, 2, and 3. So I saw you for the next round. Please introduce yourself, and if you have a question straight to one of the panelists, please do it.
Sure. My name is Tom Moylan. I work for the European Commission, and I have a question for Anke. You mentioned several practical things about how to improve our visual communication, and 2 of them I see a potential tension in, one of them being setting your designers free, and then the other one being including more people. And I was wondering how you manage that tension. Essentially what I'm asking is, what do we do when we get managers that are also aspiring artists who, you know, come on.
Thank you. You, please.
Yes, that one. Michael Swan, I work for the External Action Service. 2 related questions. One is the artist managers. A lot of the things that you said about how to do good stuff, on some level, you know, the lessons learned, I felt, were maybe lessons that you already had before you started into campaigns. So we know how we want to do things right. My question would be how to avoid doing things badly, and I'm thinking of a couple of campaigns of the Commission, like Science, It's a Girl thing, and the Ninja video, The More We Are, The Stronger We Are, which had to be withdrawn because it was judged to be racist. And the second question is about if we are really unleashing creativity, what do you do with somebody like David Czerny, who produced what was arguably a brilliant artwork which filled the Justus Lipsius foyer until it was withdrawn by the Czech presidency, the Entropa artwork. Very popular, very connected with the ordinary people outside the institutions, but had to be withdrawn because too controversial.
Oui, vous avez posé une dernière question.
Well, you asked a question at the end to panelists. Your name, please, interrupts. Mr. Njsmas, president of Nouveau Point de Vue, New Point of View. There was a question just now to panelists asking them if they have a final idea or a piece of advice to give, and what would that be? I would say that Europe is full of young people with plenty of talent, really very much talent. What I would say is give them the will to actually be participants.
More of a statement, thank you. There is any other question? Over there? Yeah, please.
Alexander Schneider, European Commission. I have more a comment than a question. I'm following the communication of European Commission and other European institutions for quite some time, and I think that the peak was actually a creativity unleashed already, and the peak was around 2007-2008. I think the best campaign ever in the history was Media Campaign 2007. Maybe you still remember, a lot of people still remember the film lovers will love.
Could you raise your voice a little bit, because it's
film
difficult
lovers
to hear.
will love this, which within a week got 2 million views on YouTube. So far, I think nobody can dream about similar numbers, and I think that we can't get there anymore. Now I don't know exactly. Well, I will not comment on this, but I think there is no any more circumstances which would allow similar campaign anymore. So I think the best thing we can do is to support and promote and rely on indie production, like we can see that one in the Netherlands. And again, there is hundreds of the absolutely amazing movies and songs and other stuff which are definitely pro-European, which are lying in the archives. They are now unknown to the grand public. So what the EU institution could do, it's to start to seek for them, list them, promote them, and support the distribution, because they are not presented because they have no distribution. The list could be very long, since the movies that they started in 1950. It's just amazing what exists already, but there is no distribution for them, because there is no real commercial idea. And I think that this we could do, and it will not cost much money.
So you basically, the question is, how can you promote more what we're doing already, and what we have done throughout history? I think we stand it here. Who would like? Maybe I can start with you first to respond. Would you? Arlene?
I didn't get any questions, so I cannot answer.
Gotten all of them. One was about the controversial art, how to make sure that, after all, art is art, and how do you make sure there is an equal ground on which you actually accept all kinds of even controversial elements. We heard this morning, I think it was Professor Clay's and I don't remember his last name, yeah, De Vries. He was basically saying we should not be afraid of confrontation, and we should, even with confrontational art, and we need to tackle that. The other question was the gentleman over there who said that basically we have how we can unleash the wealth of cultural material that we already have, and that could be used creatively to tell the the story of Europe, European Union. I mean, here we can debate, but of Europe, how Europe can be more into shown as the European Union. And the third question is a very institutional one, how you make sure that creativity does not, is done in a much broader sense, even when it's creative and it's blocked by maybe obligations and the politically correct, if I well understood. Right? That's what you said. Okay. Now I'm going to, you want to answer, Anka?
Well, yeah, I will answer Tom's question since it was directed at me. The way I've dealt with this was gaining people's trust, working with them, communication, and it's not something that can be done like by magic. It takes time, but it works, and we have started at a point where we were quite closely controlled, and everything we did needed to be triple checked, and there were a lot of opinions to take into account, and it stifled a lot the creativity. But through working together, we have managed to reach a point where we feel like we have space to create, and we can still operate in this gigantic institution that is very hierarchical, and we still have to go through all the validation process. But with the trust that we have now in our team, in the design team in COM, things are much, much easier, and we get away with things that are a bit out of the usual box. And just a little thing about how to avoid mistakes rather than... I think that involving more people in creation also helps avoid big mistakes, because if a person works in isolation on a thing and has one idea, then it's difficult to see how this could offend maybe groups of people that this person is not very familiar with. And this, I think, it's just about communication and involving people without, while still keeping it manageable.
Thank you. Yuri?
There it is. That's interesting. I don't know about these institutional questions. I think it's, I'm flabbergasted by the things I hear. 2 million views is the most we can get. Last time I checked, there were 400 or 500 million people in the European Union. 2 million is the most you can get. I mean, come on. Come on, we might as well go home and have a beer, all of us. I mean, that's so depressing. I mean, how on earth? How on earth? I mean, we did this whole forum with, a 500,000 budget from 2-3 foundations, and it was in the New York Times. It was 20 minutes on the ZDF. It was shown so many times. The play I was talking about with Jude Law is now going to Paris, is now going to Manchester. The BBC is contacting us whether they can film it to have it aired. I mean, 2 million, 2 million. And I think the other thing is, if you are stuck in the hierarchies, I mean, one way out, isn't it, is to ask real artists and pay them and come in, because you cannot tell the artist what to do, but you can have your way out. I mean, get away with, a little bit of creativity. Well, I mean, get an artist involved and in the process, and because it's not only about creating content to communicate, it's something much more deeper. Creativity is about ideas about Europe which do have content. So if you involve a real writer or a real philosopher, and if you listen to Jürgen Habermas and what he has to say about Europe, and if you involve him about what it is to be a citizen and create content, then it's something really different. Then it's not only, the message and the medium become the same thing. So it's not only about curating content for communication, it's about making something new which is creative and new, which is European culture, and which in essence always is transnational and communicates the idea that we have a continent and a community of values. And that's what we need to communicate. Because the other thing, le nationalisme c'est la guerre, that's what François Mitterrand said in his goodbye speech in Strasbourg the last time he spoke. Le nationalisme c'est la guerre. So if we do think that there's an alternative to living and working together and having a common culture, then we must be out of our mind, because we know where that leads. You know, everybody who has 2 seconds time to read about European history in the 20th century knows where it goes if we go down that lane. So if we communicate that and use artists with real content and real writers, I mean, you cannot stop with 2 million views. I mean, that's just, beyond anything. And if you're stuck by the people above you who think they're artists themselves and want to make something really nice with a little bit of colors, I mean, we pay 500 billion every year out of the European Union budget to cows and pigs. That's half of the European Union's budget. Can we pay a little bit to artists and creatives to sell the most peaceful idea in history?
Yeah, but Yuri. Yuri, but surely it's not just about money, isn't it? Because there is...
It's also about money.
It's also about money, but it is, as we heard, the gentleman over there was talking about talent. How do you, I mean, it's a civic duty to shelter and preserve what we have achieved up to now. So I think it doesn't need to be, an artist does not need to be completely paid. He could, like Bono is doing. I mean, obviously, he's coming and singing with the flags.
Oh my
I mean,
God!
now,
This is Wolfgang Tillmans pays himself for it. These are millionaires. There are many other artists. You cannot ask the dolmetscher or the talk or to do their trade for nothing. Of course. I mean, if you can ask citizens, sure, but you cannot ask designers for that.
No, a designer is a different thing. If they're doing a work, I agree. But talking in a creative way about Europe, they don't need to be paid. I mean, you and I go outside, we are paid for something, but we go out and we talk about Europe. My question is, how do you make those artists talk about Europe in a creative way without having being hired to do it? That's maybe
I just wanted to comment
a provocative question, of course.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on something that, I mean, we are part of the bubble, but also artists are part of the bubble. They have their own bubble, or maybe there are a kind of a European artists bubble or millionaires bubble, as you said. Some artists are millionaires. Okay, let's face it, that's not ordinary citizens. So this explains why we just reach like only 2 million people, because we are talking basically to not really ordinary people, or it's quite difficult to get the message across. Just saying.
I just want to make another point. Let's make a distinction between artists and graphic designers. I went to a design conference just last week, and I really liked what one of the speakers said. Is that art is all about the questions. Graphic design is all about the answers. So we in the European institutions often have to provide answers. It's not always about inspiring people. It's not always about being crazy creative. Sometimes we just have to explain what we do. We have a duty to do that. So the question is, how can we do this job that we must do? How can we do this in a way that is appealing and interesting and connects with our audience? So it's not always just bringing artists. They do a wonderful play. They have a lot of success with that. It's also, how do we explain the multi-annual financial framework, or, that's also part of the job.
Please.
Je rejoins tout à fait ce qui vient.
Well, I can entirely agree with what's just been said. Now, I showed you a number of personalities that supported our campaign. we were able to have their support for free because they believed in our campaign and they were interested in the aims of the campaign, i.e. giving a positive image of the country. They feel close to the country and they align with the campaign objectives. So I think for Europe, the same strategy could work. Stromae gave us his rights, even though normally he'd protect them, so that we could use his song Alors on danse at the opening ceremony for the NATO summit we organised in the summer, and he did this for free, but only because he believed in our campaign. And I think that goes for the others as well. Philippe Coulu, who draws a cartoon, Le Chat, he didn't request any money at all for his work because he believes in this.
That was, in fact, the provocative question I had, and I wanted to get the answer. Thank you. We are reaching the end. I'm sure the conversation can continue afterwards outside, but I need to make a conclusion here. And I must say what I heard up to now is that when there is a vision behind the visuals, values behind the visuals, it is easy to convey the message and come up with the right visuals. We heard that we need to collaborate much more, be inclusive, involve a greater diversity of participants, and but also be authentic. I think the word here that I've heard and that I retain, and it's true for the professionals we are, but also for our leaders today, is to be authentic, because people do not want any more images of what they pretend to be, but just be who they are. And that is easy to convey once we do it. And then, you know, we do have a lot in Europe, a lot of talent. I'm happy the gentleman said it. We have a lot of humor, a lot of culture, a lot of food, a lot of music. So let's keep it simple. Let's kiss each other, huh? And try to be innovative and creative as much as we can. And even dare to be creative. Thank you.